Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Welcome into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube page, do that right now. Hit that subscribe button for me really quickly. Also, be sure to turn on all of your notifications so you can be notified when we drop content on our YouTube page. Be sure to leave a like whether you are subscribed or not. As always, I am going to be here each week to break down the latest Crimson Tide football recruiting news. On today's episode, we have a lot to get to with the Crimson Tide wrapping up a huge recruiting weekend. I'm going to discuss a couple of 2022 recruits who are on the campus of the University of Alabama, and I will also discuss several underclassmen, and I'm going to start this show off by talking about an in-state underclassman in 2024 defensive end Sterling Dixon out of Mobile Christian School in Mobile, Alabama. The Crimson Tide had an opportunity to host them on Saturday. If you have been paying close attention to touchdownalabama.com in our YouTube page, you should be sort of familiar with Sterling Dixon. We did a feature video on him and a feature article on him earlier in the year before the season began in the summer, and Sterling Dixon talked about his rise in his recruitment during the summer. He only had 3 offers then, but his offer list has continued to grow, has continued to flourish despite the fact that he has only played 2 games during his sophomore season at Mobile Christian School. Unfortunately, he saw his season end after the second game of the season due to a torn labrum, but he's continuing to flourish on the recruiting trail, picking up offers from Tennessee in Georgia this month. Had an opportunity to catch up with him after he visited the University of Alabama on Saturday. He talked about his conversation with the Tide's outside linebacker coach Salson Siri, who has actually been in contact with Dixon. He extended that game day invite to Dixon for Saturday, so be sure to check out that article over at touchdownalabama.com. He's a rising prospect you guys definitely want to know about. He racked up 3 sacks in one game. It's 3 sacks in his opening game against UMS. Right, matter of fact, I think it was 4 sacks. He racked up 4 sacks against UMS right to kick off the season for Mobile Christian. So he's a guy you guys definitely want to pay attention to moving forward, as he is a sophomore at the moment. Another underclassman who was on the campus of the University of Alabama this weekend is actually a prospect who I saw in action on Friday night when Carver Montgomery took on Russo County in Seal, Alabama, and I'm talking about a guy who Alabama recently offered in 2023 4-star defensive end and edge rusher Russo out of Carver Montgomery High School. He looked really impressive in that outing when I got the opportunity to see him play. He was flying all over the football field. It is no secret why he is one of the rising prospects inside the state, and he's projected to be one of the top prospects inside the 2023 recruiting class. But he talked about the ruckus atmosphere inside Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday night. He also discussed his opinion on the Crimson Tide's coaching staff, his opinion on their entire program with me. You guys can check out that article as well over at touchdownalabama.com. Those last 2 articles that I have pointed you guys to are free articles, so be sure to check out all of that over at touchdownalabama.com. And speaking of Russo in the 2023 recruiting class, the Crimson Tide were able to host a loaded list of 2023 recruits on Saturday, as well as I'm going to show a graphic of just some of the guys who were on the campus of the University of Alabama. These are guys who a lot of Alabama fans are really familiar with at this point. When you look at 5-star defensive end Peter Woods, it is going to be hard to find a guy in the 2023 recruiting class who has visited Alabama more than Peter Woods. You also had Labius Overton, another 5-star defensive end in the 2023 recruiting class on the campus of the University of Alabama. You have some other prospects from inside the state. When you take a look at Tony Mitchell, another 5-star recruit, just pointing at the fact that the state of Alabama is going to be loaded in that 2023 recruiting class. So the Crimson Tide had an opportunity to host a good group of 2023 prospects as they continue to try to close out their 2022 recruiting cycle, but start to build and cultivate relationships with prospects in the 2023 recruiting class. Speaking of 2022 commits, the Crimson Tide had an opportunity to host a good portion portion of the 2022 recruiting class on Saturday. We are putting up a picture now which includes a good amount of the Crimson Tide commits who were in attendance. In this picture, you see guys like Emmanuel Henderson, Amari Black, Jaleel Skinner, Elijah Pritchett. You see Jeremiah Alexander and Jake Pope. Those are just some of the recruits who were in attendance on Saturday. Speaking of Pritchett, we actually had an opportunity to see him in action last week on Thursday night. We traveled to Columbus, Georgia, and we saw Carver High School take on Columbus, and Pritchett looked really impressive. You guys can check out his highlights on our YouTube page. We have a couple of different stories over at touchdowналabama.com on Pritchett, including an interview with the head coach of Carver High School and Corey Joyner. He had a lot of great things to say about Pritchett and some of the improvements that he has made during his senior season at Carver High School. Joyner called Pritchett a one-man wrecking crew, so be sure to check out those articles over at touchdowналabama.com. The Crimson Tide's 2022 recruiting class had an opportunity to bond over the weekend, continue to cultivate their relationship and build a bond together, but they also want to add some prospects to the Crimson Tide's 2022 recruiting class, help Alabama's coaching staff land some of their top targets. And this weekend they had an opportunity to connect with several of the Crimson Tide's top targets in the 2022 recruiting class. One guy who was on campus was Curtis Perry, the 4-star defensive lineman out of Pike Road High School in Pike Road, Alabama. I feel like I am talking about Curtis Perry every week, but he had an opportunity to visit Alabama on Saturday after visiting the University of Alabama a couple of weeks ago when the Crimson Tide defeated the Ole Miss Rebels. Of course, Alabama is listed in Perry's top 5. I've said this a couple of different times on the process. I feel Alabama's in a wonderful spot with Perry. I would even go far as to say that Alabama is the leader for Curtis Perry at the moment, but Perry had an opportunity to visit the University of Alabama. Once again, he has been really impressive for Pike Road this season. We had an opportunity to see him in action earlier this season. His highlights are on our YouTube page as well. Be sure to check out those impressive highlights by Curtis Perry, the 4-star defensive end out of Pike Road High School in Pike Road, Alabama. A guy who was a bit of a surprise visit to the University of Alabama this Saturday was a 4-star wide receiver in Aaron Anderson, a guy who we basically focused last week's show on. Anderson is the 4-star wide receiver who plays for Etna Carr High School in New Orleans, Louisiana. He had an opportunity to visit Alabama this weekend. Of course, in an interview with gsports.com after he decommitted from LSU, he said that Alabama was probably the front runner for him, so Alabama getting him on campus was huge for the Crimson Tide, especially with their 2022 commits on campus that Saturday, including the Crimson Tide's 5-star quarterback commit Ty Simpson, who could be hooking up with Anderson at the next level if he chooses to commit to the University of Alabama in the future and play for the Crimson Tide. The Crimson Tide also had a good portion of the 2022 recruits on campus going back to their 2022 commits. Amari Black took his official visit over the weekend to the University of Alabama. He told me he and his family had a great visit to the university. Of course, this was his first time back after he committed to the university after camping at the university during the summer. So this was his first time back, getting an opportunity to visit campus with his family, an official visit, which means he spent multiple days in Tuscaloosa over the weekend. So the Crimson Tide have a loaded group of tight ends in the 2022 recruiting class, having 2 of them on campus last Saturday in Jaleel Skinner and Amari Black. Of course, they have a commitment from Elijah Brown. So the Crimson Tide looks as if they have Amari Black locked in, especially after this great official visit with him and his family visiting campus. Another guy who visited is a guy who recently decommitted from the Florida Gators and 4-star linebacker Shemar James out of Faith Academy High School in Mobile, Alabama. The Crimson Tide had an opportunity to get him on campus. Many believe his recruitment is going to come down to Georgia and the Crimson Tide. Of course, just following James' recruitment when he committed to Florida, he said Alabama's coaching staff told him that they were not going to stop recruiting him until he signed this national letter of intent. He has not done that. He has decommitted from the Florida Gators, reopened his recruitment, and the Crimson Tide looks as if they are going to continue to push for him. It was good that they got him on campus last weekend. Hopefully they can battle it out and win over the Georgia Bulldogs and pull in the in-state prospect, a guy who's just an all-around athlete, a guy who could actually be an offensive player at the next level with the athleticism and the energy that he brings to the football field. So Shemar James is a recruit that we are going to continue to pay attention to, but it was good that the Crimson Tide were able to get him on campus on Saturday. The last prospect I want to talk about today is a 5-star offensive lineman who officially visited the University of Alabama over the weekend, and I am talking about Kiante Goodwin out of Indiana. He is currently verbally committed to the Kentucky Wildcats, but he is reevaluating all of his options, keeping his options open, and just enjoying his recruitment process in general. He plans to take a couple of different official visits before he makes his final decision and signs his national letter of intent to the school of his choice. Like I said, Alabama had an opportunity to host him this past weekend, and he chronicled his official visit all over social media, showing when he was interacting with the Crimson Tide's four-star offensive lineman commit Tyler Booker, showing when he was talking to Bryce Young, the Crimson Tide starting quarterback, showing him interacting with Nick Saban, of course, talking with Miss Terry. Also, when he first got to the University of Alabama, showing when he arrived on campus and walking into his hotel room to enjoy his official visit to the University of Alabama. So Kiante Goodwin looks as if he had a great time at the University of Alabama throughout the weekend. Of course, like I said, he's verbally committed to the Kentucky Wildcats. It will be interesting to see how his recruitment plays out in the future. Of course, when you take a look at his size, being a 6'8", 300-pound offensive lineman who can move like he does, he's a guy who every school would love to have, and the Crimson Tide would love to add him to their 2022 recruiting class. And when you take a look at who they have verbal commitments from, and Jadane Shore, Tyler Booker, and also Elijah Pritchett, if they can add one, possibly two, but most likely one more of those talented offensive linemen that they are currently recruiting, this 2022 recruiting class could not be far away from the historic offensive line class that they signed in the 2021 recruiting cycle. So the Crimson Tide are going to continue to recruit a couple of different offensive linemen in this 2022 recruiting class, and I think Kiante Goodwin is a guy to pay attention to as he just continues to evaluate all of his options, continue to take several different visits, but he's still verbally committed to the Kentucky Wildcats at the moment. But that is what I wanted to talk about on today's episode of The Process. We will continue to provide updates from this past weekend when it comes to the Crimson Tide's official and unofficial visitors over at touchdownalabama.com. So be sure to stay stuck to the site. Also, be sure to pick up your subscription today as well. As always, thank you guys so much for joining me today on our YouTube page. If you're not subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Also, be sure to leave a like whether you are subscribed or not. Then head over to touchdownalabama.com. Pick up your subscription today. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles, get your hands on our yearly print magazine issue. Then head to the Google Play Store if you have an Android device, or to the Apple App Store if you have an Apple device, to download the Touchdown Alabama app. With that app, breaking news notifications can be sent to your mobile device by the staff here at touchdownalabama.com. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Like I said earlier, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama.
Process.